Welcome to the Legacy Podcast of Harmony Hill. I'm Todd Core. Joining me is our pastor, John Green, who at the time of this recording has been our senior pastor for 50 years. And in this series, we're just asking him questions, reflecting on ministry and leadership and God's movement over the last 50 years. And so, Pastor John, thank you for being with us again for a third episode.
Sure, Todd. I look forward to it. I'm having a good time.
Well, good.
Thank you.
Me too. So today, or in this episode, what I wanted to ask is, you've told this story before, but I want to share this for posterity. Is during I think you've said it was maybe around year 18 of ministry, something like that. Maybe it was earlier. You almost left Harmony Hill. And God did a work and made a promise. And so I wanted to allow you to sort of share that story of what it almost looked like for you to see if God was leading you somewhere else, and then how that, obviously, for 50 years you've been here, so that did not happen, but it got real close. So why don't you tell us that story?
Yeah, it really did. Well, when you look historically, I think even, in the Old Testament as well as the New, you see God's people who are seeking to be obedient to the Lord, do what God wants them to do, and yet it's hard, and they get weary in the midst of it. And so I think, Abraham is obviously a good example, Old Testament wise. He grew weary in waiting for the promise of God, on his life. The prophets would get weary. Jeremiah, of course, went through a real difficult time. And, and God told him at one time, he said, if you find it difficult to stay faithful to me now, what are you going to do when it really gets hard? Which would not be a good session to have. It's going to get worse than this. And, but, then you come to the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, and Paul talks about, and I think it's to the church at Colossae that he, had gone through, or maybe it's Philippians, he'd gone through so much, and had suffered so much, being beaten and stoned and all this and everything. And, he makes a statement, he said that he came to the point that he despaired even of life. And so, I mean, when ministry is so hard that you think, death would not be bad. That's a mouthful. And so I've never gotten to the place where I think death would have been a relief, for which I'm grateful. But being at one place for 5 decades has come at a cost. And I understand. I don't think necessarily that God's plan for every man is to be at one place for his entire ministry. I'm not going to say that. I don't think you can get that from the Word. But for me, it was. And I knew during my ministry time, that guys were staying on average, as I said, first of all, 1.5 to 3 years. And now I think it's up to like 5 years, maybe a little bit more. But I just, I began to realize and came to the conviction, you can't do anything significant and long lasting unless you stay and really bring about some change that will make a difference. God had to bring me to that. We, had, as I said, we came here in 72. In 74, we went into our first building program, and we built our oldest worship center up here on the hill. And, God was blessing in that. But I was also going through some real hard times and with regards to leadership. And I'm not naturally pugnacious. I'm not the kind of guy that say, I like nothing better than a good fight. And so that's just, that's not me. So it was always a grief, and I thought, at times I've thought, I can't keep doing this. I just can't keep doing this. And so it happened that in one of those times when I was really struggling, that I was invited to come to a church in Arkansas to preach and fill a call. And so I was so low at that point, I was like, yeah, I'll go. And so we went up there. This church was over 100 years old. She had never in her history issued a unanimous call to a pastor until me. And they issued, and they were just like, this has never happened. But you have a unanimous call, not one negative vote. And, they're going to do this, they're going to do this, you're going to do this, we want y'all to come. And so Catherine and I were driving off and going back home, for me to have some time of prayer. And she just said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, you're going to think, I don't know what you're going to think about this, but I said, the only thing I keep hearing inside of me is like, I just hear God's voice saying, if you stay, I'll bless you. Now, at that point, we were landlocked, and we had I'd gotten some extra land from this particular family for us to have a little bit of a parking area for the church. But at this point, we were packing out the worship service. Cars were parking on both sides of the road out in front of our church, going both ways, and people walking to come in. And so, God was working, the blessing was there and all of that. And so I said, the thing that I hear God saying to me again and again is, if you stay, I'll bless you. And so this church in Arkansas was landlocked. And so they were having to think about moving. And Harmon Hill was landlocked. And I told her, I said, either place I go, stay or go, I'm facing the same thing. And I've got an investment in these people. I think it was I'd been there, I think maybe six or 7 years at that point. And even though I was really having a hard time with pastoral leadership, just getting the church to where I felt like she needed to be biblically with regards to pastoral leadership and following pastoral leadership. And so I said, I think we're just going to stay. And it was a risk because, we couldn't get any more land. And so I came back and I don't know at what point it was, but I got on the phone and I called this family. And so I told the lady, I said, we would just, I said, I'm not wanting everything, just 10 acres. And she just said, Brother Green, she said, I can't do that. I promised my mother on her deathbed I would never sell the land. And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but I said, here's our deal. I said, if we don't get some more land, we're going to have to relocate the church. And God just used that. There was an immediate 180 in her attitude. And it was like silence on the other end of the phone. And she said, are you being truthful with me? And I was like, yes, ma'am. I said, I would not lie about this. I said, we don't have room for people to park. They're on the road. It's dangerous. And I said, if we don't get some more land, I said, we'll have to relocate the entire church. It was quiet. She said, well, let me talk to my husband and I'll call you back. And I was like, okay. And so I don't know, it wasn't very long. And she called me back and she said, I'm going to sell you the land. And so she was going against her mom and the promise she made on her mother's deathbed.
Wow.
But God, kind of usurped that. And so she set it all up. And she said, we want $25,000 down. And then you'll pay us $10,000 a year at simple interest until it's paid off. We had $25,000 in our building fund. And so we were immediately able to move in and to get into that. And so, and she said, you've got to take all of it, which was 23 acres.
Wow.
And so, so in one fell swoop, when I just did what God said, stay and trust me, then he kicked the door wide open. And And so there's been that, that kind of testing that the Lord has done, that he had a plan. He let me know that his plan was to bless, but he didn't give me the details. And I've had to trust him again and again to do what he said he's going to do. And he's always come through. He's always come through.
Wow. About how long from when you turned down the church in Arkansas to approximately when the church was able to purchase that land?
6 weeks.
Oh, I guess I didn't even realize it was that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it was an immediate
It
answer.
was almost immediate. It was like God was like saying, I've got things in hand. Don't walk off when I'm about to lay something in your lap.
Wow. I did not realize it was that close
Yeah,
together.
it was really fast. It really was.
Wow. And so, yeah, I've heard you say that many times. I like that. If you stay, I'll bless. The Lord's saying that to you. What are some other ways, looking back in time? I mean, that was an immediate 6 weeks. But what are some of the other things that you personally count as God answering that prayer of blessing over these last 50 years?
Well, I came to a low point again after that, because one of the things, and this is not to I don't seek to disparage anyone, and when I say this, this church has always been loving and gracious, to me, but there were certain things that were believed because that's the way it's always been done, and not because it was biblical.
Right.
And so I came to a point of just desperation again, and I was asked to come in view of a call, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. And so we went, and the boys were small, and we got out of the car at the hotel that the church had, had rooms for us. And Kathy and the boys went in front of me, and when I came in, when my feet crossed the threshold of the door, I remember I stopped, because it was like just as clear as my call. God said, "You're not coming here." And I mean, just as clear as it be, don't come here. It's not my plan for you. And I told Catherine, I said, well, you're not going to believe this. But I said, we're not supposed to come here. And she said, well, what are we doing here? And I'm like, I didn't know until my foot hit the threshold of this hotel room. And I said, I can't come. Well, we went through the weekend.
Oh, man. So awkward.
Gave a unanimous call.
Goodness gracious.
For me to come as pastor. And I knew all along my answer was going to be no. And so I did. I said no. And there came a point of crisis when I said no, because, God said, if you stay, I'll bless you. And it was right after that we were a deacon-led church. I had the firm conviction that God had this in me, that he wanted me leading. There was things he wanted to do that I needed to be able to initiate. And so I just, I came to a point of just, I didn't know how God was going to work it. We had this watershed event business meeting, and the deacons made a recommendation. And so, of course, I was moderating, and a church member, well known in the church, looked up to by the church members, stood up in the back, and he said, Brother Green, he said, we know what the deacons want to do. But he said, what we want to know is, what do you want us to do?
Wow.
And I said, well, this is what I think we need to do. And the church voted to go with me. That was the point at which we became a pastor-led church. And it totally changed the direction of the church body. And so, but it was all a process. And in every time it happened, God tested me. Are you going to do what I told you to do? And so it's like, it's like that Abraham moment. You've got to raise that knife, and you're full well, like I'll do it. I'm going to plunge it. I'm going to carry it through. And God says, "Wait, I just wanted to see that you mean business with me, and here's what I'm going to do." And so that's what He did. And,
Wow. Looking back I know it's easier now looking back as a historical record, the right decision and how God blessed. But I'm sure that at the time, I 100% vote for you in view of a call at two different places. Could have easily felt like, well, that's obviously God's will
yes,
there as well. As you're sort of talking to those that may be listening, and not necessarily just pastors, but anyone who's listening who has a big fork in the road moment, which we all have those at one point or another, and to trying to discern God's will. Sometimes we can look at exterior signs. What advice would you give, and have you given, as you've been giving this advice for 50 years, but to someone who's at a fork in the road moment, on what you would advise them for how to discern God's will for making a decision?
yeah. Good question. God, I've never known my Father to call upon me to do something that He hasn't already historically, previously, someplace in my life, giving me everything I need to base my faith on. And so I think for every child of God, it is to look at what has God been doing in your life. What have you discerned are the messages that God has said to you, that has spoken to you about what He's wanting to do in your life. And then you use that because I've never known the Father to expect me to make a blind leap into the dark. It's been He will call upon me to take a step of faith, but He has given me everything I need. I have the building tools, the materials for a step of faith that God's already put in my life. And so, excuse me. So I think that you look and say, okay, what has God been doing? What's God been saying to me up to this time? And my experience has been there will always be an alignment of where God is leading me, that He's already given me everything I need previously to make that decision and to know what I need to do. So that would be my advice. What's God been doing? How's He been leading you? And that's why I tell our people here, and I'm sure you've heard it time and again, that how would the church feel if I told them, hey, I want you to rejoice with me. I've been called to this huge church in Dallas, and they're going to pay me 3 times what you guys have been paying me. What would you think about that? Well, that's kind of crass, Pastor. Just you're hungering for money, and I'm like, why would it be different in the life of any child of God? I don't see in Scripture that God is going to use a bigger salary to be the primary motivation for leading you where He wants you to go in life. It's about the call that's on your life. It's about making an impact, for His glory. And it just has to do with how He's using you and the work that He's doing inside of you, and the financial rewards or whatever. I mean, God's promise, I will take care of you. He's going to take care of us. He said, if I feed the birds, I'm going to feed you. And so, but our primary motivation is not am I going to get a bigger salary? That's nice. But does this line up with God's call on my life as I understand it? So
that's good. I think there's biblical precedent for that as well. Of God often will remind in the Old Testament, remember when I brought you through the Red Sea, so you can trust me for this next step.
Exactly.
And so it's an important reminder that our decisions as believers are spiritual, not just looking at external factors like 100% vote somewhere.
Right.
God was doing something different in your test, like you said, was to lay that down and say, but I'll trust him to bless me if I stay. So, Pastor John, thank you so much for sharing those stories. I hope it's been encouraging to you as you listen. As we conclude, thank you for listening to the Harmony Hill Legacy Podcast, and I hope you'll join us for episode 4 as it comes out later. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, share, drop a review. Let people know about it so that we can grow the audience, so that they can hear about what God's been doing in Pastor John and here on the Hill over the last 50 years. We'd also love to have you come and join us for in-person worship on the Hill.